Before we get into this week's episode, I have a very special announcement I'd like to share with you all. As my valued listeners, I wanted you to be the first to know about the inaugural Women and Wealth Catalyst Summit that I'll be hosting in 2025. I hope you'll join me and some other amazing women on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco for a full day of impactful sessions, including fireside conversations, intimate panels, and engaging discussions with values-aligned partners. Do not miss this opportunity to ignite your path to financial success and become part of a supportive network committed to achieving wealth. Reserve your spot today at women.win. That's right, ladies, women.win. And join us for a day that will shape your financial future. If you can't join us in San Francisco, be sure to stay tuned for New York City dates and venues soon to be announced. I can't wait to see you all there.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here with someone who I admire deeply, Susan Sierota. You are a two-time exited founder, but more importantly to me, a really passionate, driven, brilliant woman who spends so much time in the areas of service to others, helping other people grow their businesses, think differently, being a mentor. I'm so honored that you've decided to join me here today on Getting Rich Together, and I so appreciate you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and so excited just to have whatever time conversing with you that I can get.
Oh, yes. All right. So let's start off with not the wise Susan who's lived life, traveled, and exited companies. Let's start off with the young Susan, the one who, who maybe knew much less of the world, the one who was navigating life. You know, what was life like for you at a tender age of somewhere between 5 to 12? What were the money stories around you? What did you pick up and see?
I had a unique upbringing. I grew up in a family that was upper middle class. And so for me, what that really meant was I was surrounded by people where it was just normal to get an education. It was the path. And there wasn't like choices of after you went to high school, what did you do? You just went to college. That was the world that I knew. And that comes into it because I also grew up in a family that I basically left home at a very young age. So before I hit that age of 12, I was just crashing in different places and figuring out life on my own. And so I grew up learning how to survive, learning how to fend for myself, but also with a huge chip on my shoulder. And at the same time, knowing as much as I might not have had the mental wellness and the initiative and all the things that you need when you have confidence in a young age to actually take the right steps. And I actually got myself in tons of trouble. I knew the right steps because of how I knew that my ticket out of a life that I was living where I was around a lot of drugs, I was around a lot of people who were just trying to get by and out there just figuring out how to get meals in their mouths, right? To this part of, I don't want to be here forever. And I know the way out of that is to get an education. I lived these two very different lifestyles, where I was in it. I was not making smart choices and I was doing things that could have gotten me in a lot more trouble than I got into. And at the same time was looking for a path and a way for me once I got my head a little more on straight with some help of a couple of the important people to actually pull myself back out of it and know that for me at that point, money, power was very important. And when I defined it at that age, it wasn't money as I would think of it today. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't generational wealth. It was really power over my own life, power to take care of myself, power not to be hurt by other people. And so money took on a very specific role that probably wasn't the healthiest at that age.
I understand. I mean, it sounds like a lot of it is also, sometimes we see people and we want to be like them, but it's also really powerful when you see people and you say, hey, like, that's not for me, or this is how they ended up here, or these are the decisions that they made. And I now get to see and have the benefit of going, no, thank you. Let me try and do something another way. I think that's extremely, extremely motivated. Also, this very early on desire to be self-sufficient or have a sense of security, and, knowing that education is the ticket to the money to be able to provide for yourself at a young age, certainly is a huge driving force. And what I could imagine might be other decisions that you would have subsequently made. So as you were moving on through life and moving into university, now you're kind of in a different space in life. Hopefully, things are becoming a little bit more your own. And you're also getting a lot of exposure to a lot of different kinds of people, ideas, ways that money is influencing their lives. What were some of your early impressions, and how did you navigate through university, given your unique background and the mental framework you were coming in with?
For me, even the idea of getting into a university was challenging because I dropped out of high school. So I did not have a degree, and I also was never legally emancipated. So I couldn't go get student loans and go figure it out. So I had a lot of challenges in front of me. And thankfully, candidly, I met a really great shrink that at that age literally hunted me down because I did not trust anyone in his establishment to show me that there was a different world. And he was the one who helped me go to a community college and get straight A's. I got like 98th percentile on the SAT. So I had some stuff.
Wow.
On me. And he wrote a letter into the university saying, this is my background. She's not just this person that her record looks like it is. She has a lot more to her, and she deserves a chance. And so they let me in on a trial basis. But because of that trial basis, and because I came from a family that did have money, I ended up putting my education on credit cards, 21% interest credit cards, because I was working full time at the same time I was going to school so I could eat and have a visit. Mm-hmm. And so that money went there. And what that did for me was it made money an even bigger driver for once I graduated. It was very important to me to say I was graduating with not just debt, but it was very expensive debt. And so I knew that I needed to get myself into a position where I could somehow start with a different foundation and clear that up.
So quickly and soon after graduating with your undergraduate degree, you then also went on to do your master's, which I think is really important. I mean, clearly here you are doubling down on the thing, despite the, credit card bills and sort of student loans, still sort of a big emphasis on getting an MBA. Where did you, or what informed that decision, and how did you see an MBA as sort of the next step? And before you even had, let's say, corporate working experience, right, to sort of be able to have that foresight?
Oh, so I got my MBA after I got some working experience. And so I went after that in a very targeted way where I didn't have to pay for it. So when I was graduating, I made the decision that I wanted to go work for Procter Gamble. At that time, Procter Gamble was like the place that you went if you wanted to be a general manager, if you wanted to run a business. And they only accept people into brand management, which is that general management function with a master's degree. And so I wanted to go work for them out of undergrad into the sales department. And Rick Meckstroth was my hiring manager to this day. Just love and adore everything about him. And he had told me that one of the reasons he hired me is because in the interview, I told him that I was going to join and I was going to move into brand. And at that point, they didn't do that. He's like, very, very rare for that to happen. And so he had warned me that that wasn't necessarily going to be my career path. And he said that I got up on the table, basically leaned in and was like, yes, I am. It was really that search for I want to be in the talent function. Looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was cocky, I guess, but it was coming from a place of determination, not that security. It really wasn't. And I went there because one, it was that once you have a ticket there, you could write a ticket anywhere, but also because they paid for your master's. And so my plan was to go there, let them get really good salary, live like I had been living so I could pay off that debt, and then let them pay for my master's, and then enabled me to switch into the brand management function from there once I had my degree from one of the schools that they will take you from.
That's amazing. So at this point of sort of starting off your career at Procter, were you already informed and starting to make decisions around, oh, I need to 401k match, or I need to, make some of these early on financial decisions? Had those ideas start to come into your mind, or was that later in life?
So it was coming into my mind because it was put upon me. I was not that smart about it at that age at all. Again, what I was very lucky that I ended up where I ended up to start, which is P&G, because times were different. I'm in, as Chelsea says, an older marathon bracket. So back then, P&G actually gave you a % of your salary in a 401k every year, and it increased every year. So back then, like the janitors, other people who maintained the buildings, all retired with like some of the best retirement plans because it was something that they put in place for all employees. So it was something that I did not have to actively know enough to start saving, but was in a position where I got that as one of the benefits, which was great because I then saw the power of that money increasing and the importance of that by looking at my own accounts, which is very motivating.
Yes. And it's one of those things that I think today young people really suffer from, which is young people don't have these opportunities sort of granted to them, nor are they sort of forced into it. Now you can opt out of everything and take the full paycheck home without saying to yourself, wow, that young person probably doesn't know better, or not every young person is coming from a family where they're advising them to put money away or to start saving for retirement. And so I think it's one of the things that we suffer from today with contemporary, corporate culture, is that young people are not pushed into making smart financial decisions for themselves earlier on.
They're not pushed. They're so complex. And I do think that right now in this day and age, there's such little hope that they can improve their station. And we have gotten things a little out of control in terms of wages to living, where it's harder for them to see a way out, which I think demotivates them from saving. Because if I'm not going to ever get there, I might as well live life to the fullest now. And what I see is a lot of lack of sacrificing today for the future I want. And instead, it's like, let me just get the life I want to live in this moment, because I might not ever have that future anyway. And
so for the next 10 years or so, you spent time really building your corporate career and really kind of moving up and creating a name for yourself in the corporate world. And I'd love to know a little bit about how you started to see the exercise of your own capital during that time period. How did you choose to spend your money during those times? What did it start to mean to you? And how did it evolve as you started off your career? And then let's say pre-launching your first startup, when did the idea of, hey, I'm going to take this money I've saved and invest that into a startup one day? Talk to me a little bit about the dominoes around money and let's say your first 12 years of your career.
Yeah, I wish I could look at you and say I was intentional and smart about it. I wasn't. For that whole chapter, the things that I did well was that I never lived outside my means. So that is the one thing looking back that I am having 4 years of college tuition on a high interest rate credit card and having to try and pay that off as quickly as you can. It scared me away from credit. To this day, I only use credit for assets that are appreciating, and everything else. Like, I do not believe in debt for myself. I went through paying that off. And so I was set up pretty well because combining not living in debt, and also I was working a and working your way up and giving it all young in your career. I wasn't spending a lot of time going out and doing a lot of vacations or needing a lot of things because basically my life was work. And so I lived pretty cost effectively and bought houses just that I was living in, and the market had always gone up. So for my first 15 years of my career, I'd moved with a big company and they helped relocate. So they paid the switching costs of housing, all of that stuff. So I just got the appreciation value of that. I had my 401k roll at that point. I had my savings from the P&G days. And so I had...
How old were you, Susan, when you bought your first home? Like, when did you start looking at real estate as an investment class?
26.
Wow. That's incredible. Like, that's something to be so very proud of, you know?
I spent the first 4 years living like a pauper after graduation with a really good salary. And I paid off the debt in 4 years. And that's when I bought them. So that was the order of operations for me. And it really was, owning a home is one of the best ways to create and generate. Because over time, even with the blips, as long as you aren't in a position where you have to sell, it has gone up and up. Right?
And so if I'm hearing you correctly, buying and selling has been sort of a part of your journey. It's been like amazing. And so before you decided to have your startup, how many times had you transacted in housing?
I had 4 homes at that point.
Wow.
I hadn't yet looked at real estate as an income property. But I was moving with companies. So I moved a lot with Procter Gamble. Then I moved to my next job with Floors. And I moved to my next job with Pete's. And so every time I moved, I sold my house and bought a new one. And so it was truly that personal home at that point.
Yeah.
I've done it a lot. And then, so by the time I went into the world of startups, I had generated a lot of retirement income, which is still there, because that's very separate, right, from my savings. And then had a good amount of savings to where I felt comfortable and confident being able to move forward without being able to pay myself a salary.
That's incredible. So tell me about the dominoes that fell to launching your first startup. How did you think about this strategically? How did things start to lay the foundation? And how soon did you know that you were going to start one? Before you started it, were there early inclinations around it? Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so I laugh. I think I'm an accidental entrepreneur and I found my calling in that because I had gone big company and then I went to another big company, but they were number 3 in the marketplace. So while they were a Fortune 500 company, they were scrappy relative to the competition. And then I went from there into Pete's, which was also a public company. But was on a different growth trajectory than Starbucks. So intentionally, because of the brand. So I really liked all of the different things you could touch as you go smaller and smaller and the impact that you can have. And so I started really enjoying that. I got to touch a lot of different types of businesses and that was fun. And then when I left, I was taking some time off and just figuring out what I wanted to do next. I had a really great offer from a company that senior executive Fortune 500 company in a space I knew really well. And I was talking to one of my sponsors, mentors about it. And I got this great offer. I think I'm going to move here. And he asked me the question. He's like, are you nervous? I'm like, no, not really. I've done this. I know this world. I've done this. And he looked at me and he's like, why the heck would you even take it? Why would you even consider it? It's like, if you're not so nervous, if you've done this, what are you going to get out of it if you've done it?
Wow.
Holy cow, you smacked me across the face with that. And I wouldn't give that advice to everyone, but he knew me. He knew what lit me up. And at this point, I'm no longer coin operating because I don't live large. I've got not just the security, but I've got the power that I was seeking at that age. It sort of changed what I want and how I want to use that. But I am lit up by solving hard problems and doing things others can't do and having real impact around me. And it's like, if you really feel this way, I can't tell you whether it's going to be the case or not, but if you really feel that you got this on lock, you're going to be miserable. And so I said, yeah, I stepped back and thought about it and then decided to start my own. I'm going to the world of startups because that was new, hadn't been done before, and had an ability to have some real impact.
It's incredible. And so given that you had a little bit of spaciousness to start to figure it out, how did you triangulate on your first business idea in the same way that you triangulated on your second venture? Or what were sort of the ways in which you gave yourself both runway, security, and sort of a game plan?
Yeah. So first time around, I had put some very good parameters and boundaries in place for myself in terms of how long I would give it, how much personal money I would spend, what I would do until we were able to prove out some certain milestones that I believed that there would be a future. So it was pretty formulaic, and I was okay saying, if I go do this and I don't get any return on the money that I put in, taking care of myself in the business, I will have gotten the lessons that I'm looking for and I will be fine. It's sort of like going to Vegas and saying, I'm going to put in my pocket the amount of money I'd spend on drinking anyway. And that was back in the days when I did drink. And then you're fine, because even if you lost it all, you had a great night of entertainment with your friends and it's what you would have spent anyway, right? So I sort of felt that it was like a different type of education.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time around, and ended up hitting those milestones, continuing down that road a lot longer than I thought. After leaving there and exiting, I thought I was done operating. Went up to Tahoe and started doing some fractional work and opened a CrossFit gym.
Oh my God. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, so was exiting a part of how you started the business? Was it, I'm going to run this for 5 years, I'm going to exit it? Was it, I'm going to take it to a certain number and exit it? Was it, oh my gosh, I'm done, it's time to exit? How did you decide? And my follow-up to that is, while running your startup, how good of a job did you do at paying yourself and sort of looking at both and separating out the growth of the business and the growth of Susan's bank account?
So much there. I do not believe you should ever build a business to sell. That doesn't mean that you're not going to build a business with an exit in mind. But all of the CEOs I work with today, whenever they start talking about, opportunities to exit, unless it's time, we have the conversation, don't get on that roller coaster ride. Stay on flat ground, because it changes how you lead in retirement. And if you have an overall idea of where the business is going, I think when you're building in a venture-backed world, you are either building for a huge exit or you are building for an IPO. And that's the price of taking venture dollars. That's what the venture capitalist makes. If that's not what you want to build and you prefer to take a shot at a business that actually has a better chance of putting money in your pocket, then there are other sources of capital to go after that don't require that type of risking. But we were building in a venture capital loan. So I knew that I most likely with the company that we had, were going to get to a point where we would have more impact with some market leaders. And so our goal was to build to that $1 billion valuation, but do that through an exit through an M&A process. With that said, I knew that bigger idea of we take venture dollars, we're going to have an exit. This is most likely an exit for us. Now, until it's time to really evaluate that, let's build the best frickin' business we can build. We get the customers who love us. We meet their needs. We build something that is loved and that people can't live without. The exit will come. When folks look at it and say, I'm going to give it this amount of time and exit, it rarely works out because things take longer, or you're making decisions that are for that exit that aren't necessarily the best for the customer. And in the end, you end up shooting yourself.
I think that's a really valuable thing to highlight. I think right now people over glamorize, launching a startup, and they hear of the very small percentages of exits that are also over glamorized on like 3 to 4 main publications. Mm-hmm. And there's this and then also there's this entire infrastructure that's now been built around the pipeline. I mean, if you think about sort of the commoditization of founders, right? And it's an entirely different landscape. And certainly when you are building and raising venture capital, we're talking about the days when it was probably also very, very difficult because back in 2008, no one was highlighting a lot of the needs for access and sort of like that landscape. So I think it's really so cool and interesting to hear you talk about it. So how well did you do at paying yourself throughout the time of your business?
Really poorly at first. The first couple of years, I did not take a salary. And I would not recommend that. It puts a stress on the founders to where you can't fully be concentrating on the business. I do believe that founders should probably make less amount than anyone else on the team because they have the most equity. But if you're getting to the point where you're questioning your decisions about what you need to do with the business because of what you're doing personally, financially, and you have raised money and you have hurt certain milestones, then you should take it. And I waited too long. So the first year not taking a salary, that was probably the right decision. I'd do that over. I would have started paying myself sooner. And I repeated that mistake in my second business where I started sooner. I didn't take it at first. I then took it. And then when we hit hard times, I stopped taking a salary. So I guess I never really learned the lessons because when you're in it, then I didn't practice what I preached. When you're in it, you usually do what you can for that business. But I do see people who aren't set up to do that, do it anyway and go into debt or take loans or do things to fund their business or fund their life while they get to that point. And I don't recommend that at all. I was very, very intentional, as I mentioned, saying this is the amount of money I am willing to pay on an education. And so as much as I'm like, you need to at least get rid of the stress of it, I was very clear that I am going to be okay. And I do see people that you talk about access and might not have family connections or whatever to start. And it's great if you want to live really as limited as you can. And if your situation allows for that, all of that stuff is wonderful, but don't go into debt to do it.
Got it. Well, let's move into these fun CrossFit days. So talk to me a little bit about the way you giggle and smile about this. It feels like it was like a lot of fun. It feels like it was very enjoyable. So A, how did you land on that as the next step? And B, again, coming to, you had mentioned you moved to Tahoe. So obviously at this point, it looks like after the exit, you maybe bought another home. Susan, tell me a little bit about the fun things you did with your capital after this exit and what the money started to mean to you. Because obviously after this exit, and it sounds like for many years before that, you were in a really different place. You had almost proven to yourself from your childhood that you can build the security, create the foundation, have excess capital to do things with. What did money mean to you after the exit and how did it change for you?
It's so interesting looking in hindsight. I traveled a lot and traveling doesn't take tons of money. It doesn't. I mean, you need enough money to take the time. And that's what I learned is like the reason I had money enough to travel more before we exited, but I didn't because I didn't have the time, right? Building a business takes everything you are. Good luck getting a vacation, much less. I mean, and I preach that too. I talk to all of the CEOs I work with and the importance of the role modeling, taking time back. But at the end of the day, you're making a choice when you're running a business that comes first in a lot of ways. And you can find that, but you're not going to have that same level of freedom to travel. And so time really was what I got more than money at that point. And I think it allowed my dependence on money to sort of evaporate a little bit. Like coming from a place of, I know I have enough to be secure. I know that I am taken care of. And that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is so true, right? So I have security for the rest of my life. And then instead of like thinking I need more and more money, it's become, I need time. And how do I balance that to actually get out of it? And money does give you a freedom. It gives you a freedom from the time and to be able to do things and do it at a relaxing pace and be able to travel and not sit there and worry about, your business at the same time.
Yeah. How old were you at the exit?
I was old, 40, 41.
So you also like had some wisdom around time, right? I mean, like definitely like a wisdom about priorities, about sort of what you were looking for, what you wanted. I mean, that I think is also something that it tastes differently, right? So this first exit really gave you, it was like enabling you, it feels like, to sort of embrace take this big exhale is what it sounds like.
It's, to me, that's exactly right. I'm like, money lets you breathe.
Yeah.
I will tell you, my dog needed a very expensive, and it's fine, treatment for his cancer. And they said they were going to give him 9 months. This is a happy story. He is still with me, and that is 3 years, a quarter later. But for that it's like most people can't afford to pay. And I didn't think twice. I didn't have to think twice. And I don't think most people would want to think twice. I think people find ways to do it by hook or by crook and sacrificing everything. And I didn't even have to think about that. And there's such a gift.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Choices.
What really matters.
So let's talk about the fun of CrossFit. Let's talk about this journey. Let's talk about opening up a CrossFit gym. So how much does it cost to open up a CrossFit gym?
So there's a wide range. Depends on how you want to do it and where you are. We were in a very expensive place living in Tahoe. And I was the business side. My partners in the venture were the superheroes from the fitness side. And because they were superheroes, they wanted really great equipment. So
Susan and the superheroes. I can see that. That should have been the name of the CrossFit gym, Susan.
No, but they were great. But we spent a good $100,000 to get it running for a small little box that has mats on the floor and equipment in it. It's wow. But we were able to get it to being a great business for everyone. And to your thing, I thought I was done operating. The other thing that I was doing financially at that time, I had the freedom, but I shouldn't say always, I always have my hands in something. I don't know what that something will be. And what I started doing at that time was investing. And I wasn't ready to invest money at first because I think I would have just lost it. I wanted to really learn more about the venture asset class. And so because I had that freedom of some time, I started looking at companies that I know could really help and advising them for equity, because it's still playing that venture game of a big payoff. It puts real money in your pocket. And if you don't want to be sitting there writing checks or having to fight to get into the best deals when you're not really putting in a big enough check to do that, you can still get on the cap tables by giving your time. And
what was that like? How did you start picking the companies that you wanted to advise, and how did you position and sort of negotiate the equity at that time?
Yeah. So for me, the way I looked at it personally, it was my education. I said at the very beginning, I really learned really young that education was the key. And to me, that's not necessarily formal school. That might be a ticket to open a door. But if you're going to invest in companies, especially risky companies, learn the game, right? And so before you put it all out there, so either write checks that you can afford to lose, and for me, I didn't have the network to get into some of the deals I'd want to, or find a way to add value. And so that's what I did. I looked at who do I believe I can add value, real value that they didn't have, intersected with who do I think was going to be really big. And I thought about it like an investment. I was like, I have a limited amount of time. I'm going to put my time into a few companies. I'm going to do everything I can to reach out to them and show them how I can add value. And then I'm going to get on those cap tables and I will learn what was right about my bets and what was wrong about my bets.
Wow.
And so before I started turning that into any individual checks that I was writing, I used my time.
Wow.
And it was a fun exercise to see who was out there, how could I connect with them, and then how could I add value?
That's so cool. So did you, from an advising standpoint, those early days, were you spot on with what you thought? Was it like, okay, I'm now refining sort of what my value proposition is? Did any of them, obviously it's like you start in one area, kind of end up somewhere else, but how did your mindset and sort of skill set evolve in that capacity? Because even still to today, Susan, you are just an incredible advisor for so many businesses. So this is something that you started then, but you really continued, I mean, this is, I think, a great part of your mentorship, add value and what it is you really bring to many of these startups and companies. So how did it start and what were you right about and what were you wrong about?
So I was wrong about so much. When I first started doing it, I literally was really honing in on what they actually had built, what their idea was early on, and how they were bringing it to life. And I'm like, ooh, that product solves a problem. That is important. Or, ooh, that's super neat. People will love that. And I used that and I was like, God, that's sexy. I want to jump in and be a part of that. And did that intersect with where I could help? And what I learned, and it might sound trite because people say it, but it's true, which is early on, if you're going to do early stage betting, what matters is the team. What matters is their understanding of the problem, because they are going to pivot more than once. And so that idea that you're like, yeah, I'm betting on that, that's going to look totally different a year from now and 2 years from now. And so my big learnings was I need to really hone in on, is this a leader that's curious? Is this a leader who has a personal tie and passion to the problem? Is this a leader that can inspire and storytell and bring on teams? And when I really started filtering that, and is it a space that I enjoy and I think I can add value? Because there are a lot of spaces that I met amazing, tremendous people, and I would not be any help whatsoever to them. So not something that I would put some time or energy to trying to do, right? Do no harm.
Totally.
And so continue. Today, I don't do early stage investing. I have written some checks as an LP into some early stage funds, but I work with enough earlier stage. I work with all stages of companies today. And I don't even want to be in the position where investing is an option, because it's harder to help the ways I want.
Yeah. So tell me, this venture into CrossFit, which is super cool, eventually came to an end. Did it come to an end just for you? Did you guys decide to close it down? What was sort of the sequencing of that? And then obviously off the heels, right, blending then into the launch of your next startup. So how are you balancing being an operator of one business, starting to think about launching another company? Tell me about what the late nights and early mornings looks like. How are you thinking and hedging risk and then looking at sequencing?
So on the CrossFit side, I started my next company while the gym was still running. We had built it to a point where it didn't need me. I wasn't the superhero. I was running it. We had the business stuff in place. We had the membership that we needed. It was running fine. I still did some stuff, but it had very easily for me turned into a side project. I was not the one who was important to that business. My partners were. And so I was already doing some fractional work. I was helping the companies I was advising, but I was also doing project work and working out every day. And then I really did not think I was going to operate again, but I lost my last dog to cancer. And for me, we all know it's part of the gig. We all know it. The thing that literally nearly destroyed me was finding out how long he had been suffering, and I had no idea. And they hide it, and the closer they are to us, the more they can hide it, because it's like service dogs hide everything. That's just how we are. They give themselves to us. And that nearly broke me. And I am so entrenched in this world of tech. And I see all of this tech that can help humans. And I'm like, there's no one doing anything that's helping our animals. And they are members of our family. They're incredible. And they give everything they are to us. How are we not doing that for them? And so I was like, okay. And I started a project and said, the thing that no one else is doing, has not even thought of doing, is, can you really get some of these vitals from a dog good enough to understand things through a collar, through a kind of hardware device? And so engaged a team, and that's where didn't have any investment yet. Just said, can we do that one? Because everything else we did was pretty complicated and pretty complex, but it was no. That was the thing at the time, that was that we don't have an idea if we can't do this. because the
Right.
company itself was going to have that hardware, consumer hardware play, but also a B2B database, really fundamentally change animal health. And so did that one thing, said, yeah, we can actually do this. And so decided to go back and operate again. And this time,
Was it the same idea of, I'm going to set aside this amount of capital again to sort of, was it the same thought process that you had as the first time? Had it changed? Okay.
So once we had that, I decided I'm going to do it very differently. And so reached out to the woman who became my co-founder, who I had worked with in every company I'd touched since being a little young and in my career. So we knew each other well, and I knew her skills well, and said, do you want to come do this? And she was not able to, she was the breadwinner of her home. So she couldn't do it until we actually hit some milestones and had some money, but she was going to be willing to do it as a side hustle, in the meantime. And I went and to, the two gentlemen who became my first two board members and said, hey, this is the idea. I want to do this. I want you to give me a check and come do this with me. And
I love that. What a great direct ask to say, hey, like this is the opportunity. Let's go.
Yeah, totally. And so started it out with some money in the bank once we had that. And it's a privilege that I think you get after. It's hard to have as a first-time founder. But afterwards, and I also got to pull on people from my network who knew me from the bigger company days as well, and who knew my work and said, yeah, definitely, let's go make this happen. And so I did it differently. The thing that I did that I wouldn't recommend is we had so many ups and downs. It's when they say hardware is hard, it's so much more capital intensive than software. You so don't have control of things. You are working your ass off for the opportunity and luck in a totally different degree. And there were some things that really hit. And so when the company were at the multiple points that I think almost every startup faces, even if not in hardware, is where you're almost dead. As a company, there were times along the way that I just stopped paying myself. And looking back, I probably should have accrued my salary for that time period because I'm still working my tail off. But or accrued it and then turn that into an equity instead of cash, right? So
yeah,
but I did not. And while you're in it, you just want to make it work, right? But that was a hard one because it was, yes, my board believed we were building $1 billion business. We had all of the indicators that we could get there, and the pandemic hit, and we had semiconductors in our product, and you couldn't get semiconductors for a couple of years. And so without being a earlier stage company, you can't weather 2 years. On top of that, we had really complex manufacturing. There were multiple stages that we had set up, but we did not yet get to the point where we had vertically integrated and owned our manufacturing. And so one of the major car companies who couldn't manufacture in China anymore came and bought up the plants of that. So that would have had us slowly. So at that point, we had the opportunity to look at the changed risk reward equation of where we were, and it made more sense to have the exit. So that was a swing where we thought we were over some of these huge humps and the hard times of almost dying, and really had indicators. Gosh, for a first generation hardware product, we had a community of a couple 100,000 people who were super passionate about their dogs. We built a dog pit.
Wow.
It was so authentic. And we had, out of those people, 70% of them prepaid for a 2-year subscription after getting their product because they were part of this mission. And so you start looking at the voting with your dollars. It was pretty awesome. It was also really hard to let those dogs down and say that we're selling the IP, but your Amazon servers aren't going to be up, and you've been relying on this for your So there's a lot there. I will say where I was so lucky is we had raised money along the way, and the people that we took money from were good and good people who understood that we did everything we could and understood how hard and understood what was going on. And to be able to return capital is a big deal, and not have a return that paid was everyone's dream. But it wasn't about the money. It was about saving animals' lives. It was about the money. But in that moment, after it wasn't about the money, after that, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes when it's like, okay, it's always about that money, and especially in venture. But once that is not going to be there to that degree, then there's two different types of behavior. And you can check out and just be like, I know I have other things to put my time into. Or let's do this the way we can with support, because it's not just about that now that that's off the table.
That's amazing. And it also sounds like this exit lands a little bit different in your spirit because of the nature of the mission you were on, and also the community that you had built, and sort of this, like, it's almost the dream trifecta of a startup, where you have a strong leader combined with really strong values-driven mission, and then community that's really able to uplift and support and sort of come in on it. And then this foundation of loving capital that's like, hey, let's create something that's going to be good for the world. That's a really interesting dynamic setup that I don't think is seen often. You know, I think it's a real testament to your spirit and where you're at. So in the years, you know, leading up to now, you know, you've now had 2 exits. You've been doing a lot of advisory work. I know that you are also, you know, a champion of people. And so I'd love to hear about how you're looking at your energy and your resources right now. So resources meaning your time, your money. How are you sort of structuring your life today? And how are you looking at this body of work that you will be continuing to build? Because Susan, even though you didn't plan on being an operator 3 times, you were. Yes. And I hate to say this, but you know, maybe there might be a couple other things that you find your appetite and expertise leading into. So this body of work that you're creating and what you're up to these days, tell me more about it.
Yeah, never say never, right? So I like to say yes to things that are fun in the moment right now, which is a great place to be. It really is. So right now I spend my time supporting other people who are doing the hardest thing in the world, which is build. I sit on boards. I advise. I'm an occasional coach and help where I can. And that's really awesome. It allows me to work across all stages. I help a public company. I help a couple seed companies and everything in between. And so I love that because I don't have the recency bias of stage or industry. And I think that gives me a unique point of view to add. I like it because to me, at the heart of it is building is so hard. It is so hard. Even when you're surrounded by good people when you're doing it, it is so hard. And if you're going to build venture, it's even harder because it's high risk, high reward. I shouldn't say harder. I don't mean that in a general way. It's more roller coastery potentially. And gosh, there were times when I would call my best friend across all businesses and just not even be able to talk and just not be alone in it, because as the CEO, you are alone in it. You can't not be alone in it. And I would just thankfully have friends that he would sit there on the phone and just tell me about his life. So I would not feel alone and I'd hang up. And I today get to work with people who are doing the hard act of building and hopefully be part of that person when they feel less, and that's important to me. And I really
love that.
And I get to watch these incredible people who are smarter and better than I ever was build these incredible things and get a front row seat to it, which is also crazy amazing. And so I think I will always do that. But I am looking at doing some other things as well, where it's not necessarily operating, but where I am surrounded by people who are doing really cool stuff and I'm going to learn more. I want to go back to school, the type of school that's building a company school or figuring out a small business school, not a college. But I am seeking a new thing to get really smart on and learn about by doing. And I'm not 100% what that is yet. I don't think it will be operating for this next, but it'll be something.
I love that. If you could tell your young self, 10 years old, who's wondering what's happening in her life, I imagine with a lot of anxiety and stress and things that young children should not have to experience. And yet here you are today, this incredible inspiration and this brilliant woman. What are some of the words that you would use to soothe her? What could you tell her?
Oh gosh. I don't know if it would soothe her, but what I would tell her is believe in yourself. I think that it's really hard to do that. I think if you don't have a traditional family growing up, it's even harder to do that. And I lived too long with a chip on my shoulder because I didn't believe in myself. And that girl did not believe in herself. She did things in spite of that. And she was not content in that. And we eliminated joyful moments because of that, because everything was wrapped in insecurity and needing more. And so I did a lot, but it took me a lot longer to find the joy in doing it. And that's the thing I would want to go back and have her do differently, because there was a lot of joy in that I did not necessarily focus on experiencing.
I can feel that. And projecting ourselves into the future, the Susan Sierota who's at 110 years old and who's looking back on legacy and this beautiful life that you've created, you have so much more living to do. And while you may not know the details yet or the particulars of how it will unfold, what are some of the areas of satisfaction that you hope to have and things that you would like to look back on as part of your legacy?
People. Big believer. The one thing that play long-term games with long-term people. And that's been something I've been doing, and that's what I want to do more of. And it doesn't mean that I have to know the future people long-term, but they will be long-term going forward, right? It's like, pick those people that it's fun, where it's joyous, where you have shared values and you're wanting to accomplish something bigger than yourself. So you can hit the challenges and get up the 87th time you get punched, and doing that with people that can laugh through it and that you respect and are in awe of. I get to be surrounded by so many people I'm in awe of, and I would just want more of that, honestly.
I love that. That's so fabulous. And then my last two questions for you, Susan. The first is, money is often a thing that ties us so closely into our lives. I mean, we can't escape it. It's often something, no matter how much we have, some folks will always have a scarcity mentality. Some people just have, it's always integrated and woven, but it's also a lot of fun. And there's a lot of enjoyment that can be done with your money. What are some of your most favorite things to spend your money on?
Oh gosh. Good dining experiences. I won't think twice about. Really good food. We should only eat really good food if we could. So travel. I won't think twice about hopping on an airplane. I don't care if there's not plans. Just go. If you can find the time, just go and do it. It's worth it.
I love that.
And my dog's health. That's fun. It really is. Well, I'm not talking about the sad stuff. I'm talking about all the fun stuff that I get to do. It's sort of a little crazy. He goes on a pack walk because he needs friends. I bought him friends. I walk him every day too, but I bought him friends. So
how fabulous.
Stuff. Don't want to think about it. And then I've been getting more into art. I am not the best at visual stuff. I would love if I had the ability to buy homes and decorate them and remodel them. I don't have the eye. I enjoy living in a really nice place, but I can't create them. So I don't. That's money lets you have someone else create them for you.
It sure does.
But yeah, I also live my life. I will be honest, I want more and more money. I want generational wealth. I want power, back to that word, because the world is getting ickier and ickier sometimes, and I want to be able to do good things with it. But it's for a different reason now. But I don't see the need. I think I believe the quote, and gosh, for the life of me, very famous person who said it, that the biggest money flex is living like a pauper. I don't take it to that extreme, but I think you have to be. There's a lot of things I don't think you need.
Yep. I hear you. My final question, darling, is how can we, the audience, support you? What are you calling in? How do we evangelize your work and your purpose?
Gosh, that's such a great question. Take care of each other. Do one thing for someone else. Pay it forward. It sounds so cheesy, but that's not for me. But man, what would if we actually took time and prioritized doing something without expecting anything in return? For someone, it would be a really good thing. I say that because right now I don't have an ask. If I had an ask, I would not be shy about asking.
I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah. But since I don't know what that next thing is, like if you think I can add value to your universe, don't be shy and reach out.
Well, super amazing. Susan, thank you for your time, your spirit, your energy, for the impact you've made in so many people's lives, not only by creating businesses, but by leading by example, by raising your hand thoughtfully and saying, yes, I can help you. And here's how I can be strategic. I'm grateful to know you and consider you a friend. And I'm grateful to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.